It's just a real delight and honor to bring him to our podium, Ted Cruz.
Thanks so much. Thank you so much, Becky. It is great to be with so many dear friends today. You know, in Austin, Texas, one of my favorite restaurants, it's a restaurant called El Arroyo, and the proprietor recently announced an Obama special. Order anything you want, the next table pays. What a privilege it is to be standing with so many warriors for liberty. We are at a unique time. Everyone in this room is here because we're committed to liberty, because we understand the power of ideas and how much ideas matter. And I'll tell you, ideas have never mattered more for the future and direction of our country than right now, today. What I'd like to do is two things, address two questions. Number one, what went wrong? And number two, what do we do about it? What went wrong is a very simple question. And it's a question that everyone in this room already knows the answer to. You know, the book of Ecclesiastes tells us there is nothing new under the sun. And I'm going to suggest everything we're seeing today we've seen before. The year 2008 reminds me a great deal of 1976. In 1976, Republicans had held the White House for a decade. And yet we'd lost our way. We'd stopped standing for our principles. We'd given in to corruption. And a young, charismatic politician came on the scene, campaigning based on hope and change. Jimmy Carter looked into the TV camera and said, "I will never lie to you." And after the Nixon presidency, that sounded pretty good. But we also remember the consequences of that far-left administration when they came into office. We remember double-digit unemployment. Sounds kind of familiar. We remember 22% interest rates. We remember gas lines going around the block. And most shamefully, we remember our hostages languishing in Iran for 444 days, while the president wrung his hands and had no idea what to do. Now, why is it that that analogy gives me so much hope and optimism? Because 1976 had a happy ending. It took Jimmy Carter to give us Ronald Reagan. And I am absolutely convinced the most long-lasting legacy of President Barack Obama will be a new generation of leaders in the Republican Party rising up to stand and fight for liberty. If there's one message I hope everyone hears from me today, it is a message of encouragement. It's very easy as conservatives to be disillusioned and demoralized. We had some wins. We thought the left was on the ropes, and Obamacare ends up being jammed down our throats anyway. It's really easy to be down about that. And yet I am here to tell you there is something extraordinary going on in this nation. In 1980, we had the first great conservative awakening. Many of the men and women in this room played a critical part in that battle for ideas. As the American people came together, stood up, and fought to reclaim our country. I am absolutely convinced right now, today, we are in the midst of the second great conservative awakening. Every one of us is in this room because we are committed to fighting for ideas and fighting for our nation. There could not be a more important time to be fighting this fight. This is quite literally the direction of our nation. We all know the great battle that has raged through history between liberty and tyranny, between freedom and free enterprise and opportunity and entrepreneurship on the one side, and government control and collectivism and socialism on the other side. And we have marched further and faster towards government control of the economy and our everyday life in this past year than we ever have before. And yet, how many people in this room have been to a Tea Party? These things are incredible. They are absolutely incredible. A year ago on April 15th, when the Tea Party started, just in my home state of Texas, do you know there were 78 Tea Parties just in Texas on April 15th last year? That is unbelievable. And you go to Tea Parties. All right, my favorite thing to do is to watch the mainstream media try to explain the Tea Party movement. Now, the explanation I love is that this is an organized product of the Republican National Committee. Now, I'm not sure there ever has been an organized project of the Republican National Committee. But if there has, this ain't it. This is something that absolutely terrifies the left. It is individual Americans, a lot of men and women who've never been involved in politics before, who are rising up to stand and fight for our nation. I've been blessed to speak at Tea Parties all over Texas. Every single one, you see men and women and children there wanting to preserve what it is that makes America the most miraculous nation on earth, a beacon of freedom for the world. One of the saddest things about our president is he speaks about hope and change, and yet he doesn't seem to understand that America has been the hope and change for the world for 200 years. So what do we do about it? I'm going to suggest 4 things we do to turn this around and take our country back. First is very simple. Stand for principle. One of the biggest reasons Barack Obama was elected president is Republicans failed to lead. Republicans failed to stand up for our principles. There's not a one of us in the room in 2006 or 2008 pulling the lever didn't wince as we did so. But politics in America shouldn't be about choosing the lesser of two evils. It should be standing for the principles that define who we are as Americans. I had the great honor of spending 5.5 years serving as the Solicitor General of Texas. Now, a question everyone always asks is what on earth is a Solicitor General? Which is a good question. The Solicitor General is the chief lawyer for the state in front of the U.S. Supreme Court and all the state and federal appellate courts. The Solicitor General is the lawyer who the Attorney General sends into court to fight and win when the state is in a legal fight. Over this 5.5 years, my boss, Texas Attorney General Greg Abbott, is a man of incredible principle and character. Over 5.5 years, Texas over and over again stood up and fought for conservative values. We defended the 10 Commandments monument that stands on the state capitol grounds. We took it all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court. Virtually every other state and local government had lost when it tried to defend the 10 Commandments. We won 5-4. We defended the Pledge of Allegiance when the Federal Court of Appeals in California struck it down because it contained the words, "One nation under God." Texas assembled a coalition of all 50 states before the United States Supreme Court. We defended the Pledge of Allegiance and we won unanimously. Another issue One I know no one in this room cares about at all: the Second Amendment right to keep and bear arms. We defended the Second Amendment. We took it to the U.S. Supreme Court in the D.C. gun case. We brought together 31 states in defense of the individual right to keep and bear arms, and we won 5-4. And in a case with, I think, the most far-reaching implications, a case called Medellin versus Texas, Texas stood up to the World Court. The World Court, which is the judicial arm of the United Nations, issued an order to the United States to reopen the convictions of 51 murderers across this country. Texas stood up and fought the World Court. On the other side were 90 nations, all of whom came in against us, and also, sadly, was the President of the United States. I had the great honor of arguing this case twice before the United States Supreme Court. We stood up and defended U.S. sovereignty, and we won 6-3. How do we win? How do we take back our country? We stand for principle. Number two, find the right candidates. I'm going to suggest to you sometimes people make politics a whole lot more complicated than it is. This ain't rocket science we're talking about. It's not all that complicated. What is it we need in political leaders? I'll tell you in short what we need. We need people more like the men and women in this room. Now, what do I mean by that? Every one of us should look to every candidate and demand three things. Number one, sound principles. They need to know what they believe. They need to have studied. They need to have a firm foundation in the Constitution and in the principles of liberty that define who we are as Americans. If you look at the greatest president of the modern age, Ronald Reagan, President Reagan spent decades learning and building and firming up his principles and speaking all over the country, defending freedom. President Reagan had a core because he knew what he believed. Far too many of our candidates don't have that core. Number two, you need backbone. The willingness and ability to stand up and fight for those principles. That's an area in particular Republicans have been lacking recently. You know, it's interesting. All of us learned in high school biology the basic principle that invertebrates can't walk upright. And yet politicians disprove that every single day. But we don't just need principles, and we don't just need backbone. The third thing we need is the ability to communicate. The ability to motivate and inspire and connect with the American people. That's also an area Republicans have been sorely, sorely lacking. You know, one of the things that made the 2008 campaign so painful is we didn't even engage in a battle of ideas. We ceded the field and never once stood up and defended liberty. We have got to stand up and communicate our ideas. Number three, understand the opposition. We're in a unique time in our nation's history. President Barack Obama is the most radical president ever to occupy the White House. And I think a lot of Republicans still don't understand that. You know, a lot of pundits were confused. They were puzzled why this president would ram through Obamacare after it was clear what the political consequences would be. I do have to make one concession about President Obama. His stimulus plan unquestionably has produced jobs. It produced a new governor in Virginia, a new governor in New Jersey, and a new senator in Massachusetts. But this administration isn't stupid. They understood that Obamacare is wildly unpopular, and yet they rammed it down the American people's throats anyway, in a pure and ugly exercise of political might. Why? I'm going to suggest Barack Obama is a very, very different president than Bill Clinton was. Barack Obama is a true believer. Now, there are a lot of folks on the right that assign malice to Obama, view him as a malevolent character. I actually don't agree with that. I think President Obama is very much a true believer. But what does he believe? He believes in government with all his core. I think he is committed to taking this nation as far down the road as humanly possible to transforming it into a European socialist nation. That's his core. Now, I think he sleeps well at night. I think he believes he is helping the world. But you know, there is a basic dynamic in national politics that I think is important for every one of us to understand. And that dynamic is Republicans win when we effectively articulate what it is we believe. Democrats win when they obfuscate what they believe. And there's a reason for that. This country is fundamentally a center-right country. Those are the values and principles of this country. Now, that basic dynamic has direct consequences in the candidates each party selects. Republicans have this almost pathological self-destructive instinct, where a lot of time our attitude is, you know, we're right. We know we're right. We don't need to bother to explain it to anyone. And over again, we nominate and elect candidates like Bob Dole and John McCain, who, God bless them, they're honorable men, they're war heroes, they fought for this nation, but neither one can communicate a message of freedom. The Democrats, on the other hand, they get the joke. They understand, and they're consistently drawn to smooth-talking politicians, whether it's FDR or JFK or Bill Clinton or Barack Obama. And every single one of them gets elected by pretending not to believe what it is they believe. 2008, in my judgment, was the greatest act of political malpractice in modern history. Barack Obama was committed to a socialist agenda in 2008. He's committed in 2010, and he will be committed in 2012. And yet, nobody on the right explained that to the American people. I want to ask everyone to engage in a thought experiment. Imagine what would have happened if Barack Obama had campaigned on what he actually believes. Imagine it's October 2008 and Barack Obama holds a national television conference. My fellow Americans, if you elect me president, the first thing I shall do is fire the CEO of General Motors. I will then take over that venerable institution, tear up the contracts with the bondholders, and hand the company over to the union thugs that put me in office. Then I will propose a $900 billion porculus plan that will pay off every special interest on the left in the nation, including my dear friends at Acorn that gave me my start in politics. Then I will propose in cap and trade the most massive energy tax in our history that will take thousands of dollars from the pocketbook of every family in America anytime you turn on a light switch or drive a car. Then I will socialize 1/6 of the American economy. I will force through a government takeover of health care so that your relationship with your doctor becomes controlled by the federal government. And I will do so despite overwhelming opposition from the American people. I will introduce into the common parlance terms like the Louisiana Purchase and the Cornhusker Kickback. Then I will go on a world tour. I will stop before every two-bit dictator on the globe and apologize for the United States of America. I won't forget to stop in Cairo, where I will give a speech explaining that Iran has a right, and I'll use that word right, to nuclear technology. And then I'll give Miranda rights to terrorists who show up here with explosives in their underwear. You know, if Barack Obama had given that speech in 2008, there aren't 30% of the American people that believe that. That is as radical an agenda as has ever been in the White House. And if we are going to fight and stop that agenda, we need to understand this president knew full well he will pay a terrible price at the ballot box for ramming through Obamacare. But he is a committed ideologue to his vision, and it's our obligation to explain the difference. The fourth thing we need to do is demand change. That's yet another thing I agree with the president on. Change is good. We could use some change right now. There is an unbelievable energy all across this country in the Tea Parties, and the media commentators love to ask, what's going to happen in the Tea Parties? Are they going to support the Republican Party? Are they going to create an independent party? What's going to happen? The answer, I would suggest, is very simple. If Republicans' candidates for office stand up and defend liberty, then the Tea Party is the natural expression and wind behind those sails. And if Republicans do not defend liberty, we don't deserve their support. I have to say a wonderful example of that is my friend Ken Cuccinelli, the Attorney General of Virginia. He ran as good a campaign in the Commonwealth of Virginia as we've ever seen, and the central core of it was very, very simple. It was defend liberty. In this state of Florida, Marco Rubio is doing the exact same thing. I talked about how we are seeing all across this country a new generation of leaders come forward and demanding change. You know, on my Facebook page, a young lady wrote on there, if you continue to defend the Constitution and defend liberty, young people will flock to you and support you. It's not complicated. We have to stand up and actually defend liberty. Just yesterday, I launched a national petition on my website, tedcruz.org, asking people to sign up to oppose Obamacare. But the reason to oppose Obamacare isn't that we like insurance companies. It isn't that we don't want people to have health care. The reason to oppose Obamacare is very, very simple. It is because Obamacare is fundamentally contrary to individual liberty. There is a necessary correlation. Every time the government expands its power and takes over more and more aspects of our life, what is lost is the individual liberty to choose. And we need to explain that. We need to articulate it. It speaks volumes that not one of the congressional Democrats supporting Obamacare ever points to any other nation in the world that has socialized health care. Have you ever seen Nancy Pelosi stand up and say, we're going to have a system just like Britain's? We're going to have a system exactly like Canada's. Every time the government takes over health care, there are predictable results. Quality drops. Freedom of choice is destroyed. And rationing inevitably follows. They don't want to talk about reality, but it's incumbent on us to demand change and explain that it is all about liberty. It's not a complicated message. The last thing I'd like to do today is share a little bit of my personal story and how I think it reflects in my life the importance of liberty here. My dad was born in Cuba. He grew up in Cuba, and when he was 14 years old, he began fighting the Cuban Revolution. He began fighting alongside Fidel Castro. Now, he didn't know that Castro was a communist, and none of the kids, they were all 14 and 15-year-old boys, none of the kids knew that Castro was a communist. But what they knew was that Batista was a cruel and oppressive dictator. My dad spent 4 years fighting in the revolution until he was 17. And when he was 17, Batista's police captured him and they threw him in prison. And they tortured him. They beat my father almost to death. My grandfather searched for him, found him in prison, and bribed the prison guards to get him out of there. And at that point, he fled the country. He applied to several U.S. universities, and the University of Texas was the first one that let him in, which is how I came to be a Texan. So in 1957, my father arrived in Austin, Texas. He didn't speak a word of English. He had no possessions other than he had a slide rule in his pocket, which, you know, whenever I talk to young people, they have no idea what that is. And he had $100 sewn into his underwear, which my grandmother put there so they wouldn't take it from him. He went and got a job as a dishwasher, making 50 cents an hour. And he worked 7 days a week, paid his way through school, built a business, and worked towards the American dream. Now, my entire life, my dad's been my hero. But I'll tell you what I find so extraordinary about his story. How utterly commonplace it is. Every one of us in this room has a story like that in our background. Whether it's us, or our parents, or our great-great-great-grandparents. If you think of the history of this nation, what I think makes America most unique is that for centuries we have been formed from people from all over the world. And the people who came to America, they weren't the richest, they weren't the strongest, they weren't the smartest. The people who came, our parents and grandparents, were the people crazy enough to risk everything for freedom and opportunity. I'm going to suggest to you that is the most fundamental DNA of what it means to be an American. We are a people for generations who have valued liberty and opportunity above all else. One of the sad things looking at the world, looking at much of Europe, is how readily so many other nations have taken the yoke of government control. I am convinced that will not happen in America. And the reason it won't is because President Obama's agenda is fundamentally contrary to who we are as Americans. It's fundamentally contrary to liberty, to the reason people come from all over the world. There is no nation in the world where someone can start with nothing and build to the sky. This nation has been a beacon of hope and opportunity for the world for over 200 years. I am honored to be standing with so many men and women profoundly committed to liberty. Each of us in this room is devoting our lives to fight to ensure the freedom we've enjoyed will be there for our kids and our grandkids, that they will continue to live in a nation that is the most miraculous embodiment of freedom the world has ever known. We are fighting the epic fight of our generation. The stakes are literally, will this nation remain a free market economy? And I'm here to tell you I am convinced, because of who the American people are, this is a fight we're going to win. Thank you very much.